Hi, Roy here, and welcome to another edition of the Right Has Left podcast. I am your host, Roy Garden. We have a lot of material to cover today, but before I actually get into the podcast, some late breaking news. Both the House and the Senate passed the Charlie Kirk celebration of Remembrance Day, which will happen in October during the month of Charlie Kirk's birthday. The resolution actually passed quite well between Democrats and Republicans. There were 58 Democrats that did not vote in favor of that resolution. 30 of them were a part of the Black Caucus that exists in the House of Representatives, and their reasoning for not voting for it was because of Charlie Kirk's stand with blacks, that they felt that he spoke negatively about the blacks. And a couple other Democrats also did not vote in favor of it as well. Some of them just voted president, not taking a stand either way. But regardless, the resolution did pass. It will start next year in October during the month of Charlie Kirk's birthday. And his funeral, of course, will be tomorrow, the weekend as I tape this podcast. Again, my condolences to the family. And we now will have a celebration of his life starting next year. So that was some late breaking news, having said that. So let's go ahead and get into the podcast. In a surprise move on Friday morning, a panel of vaccine advisors to the federal government backed off from a proposed change to the vaccine schedule that would have scraped the current recommendation that all children receive the hepatitis B shot at birth. So that was quite interesting. As you're well aware of, the CDC is made up of basically private citizens. There is absolutely no medical professionals that are on the panel because Kennedy fired all of them and appointed his own people to sit on the committee. It also reversed a vote that it took yesterday on coverage for a shot known as the MMRV. So what happened here is they voted one way on this particular resolution for measles and shots and vaccines and polio vaccinations for children, and then they turned around the next day and reversed it because of the outcry. So they said that the panel on the vaccines for children would cover the combined shot if parents want it. So yesterday, on Friday, they voted that it shouldn't. The MMRV shot is no longer recommended to be given, and it will not be paid for by government insurance. The Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices, or ACIPs, had spent much of Thursday debating the rationale for giving newborns the hepatitis B vaccine at birth. But then the committee pushed off the vote until this yesterday, and then instead it proceeded with a separate vote that removed the MMRV shot for children under age 4 from the vaccine schedule. They stated, "We are rookies," Chair Martin Kolderoff said at an opening of the second day of the meeting. "With one exception, this was either our first ACIP meeting or our second. The ACIP panel crafts recommendations on vaccine policy for the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention under RFK Jr.'s influence." So he admitted it. We're rookies. I'm telling you, this committee is a cluster muck. It's they don't know what the hell they're doing, and they literally admit that they don't know what the hell they're doing. Beforehand, we had a panel made up of professionals in the medical field that understood these programs. They understood these shots. And what is sad about all this, as you're probably going to figure out, is whatever the CDC decides, usually your health insurance providers follow suit along with whatever the decisions they make, and that decides whether or not they're going to cover any of your your shots for your kids, whether you're going to pay for it out of your pocket or whether they'll cover it with insurance. And this is why it is such a sad situation, ladies and gentlemen, is because you're going to maybe wind up paying hundreds of dollars for inoculations and shots for your kids as they enter, grade school. And my question to you is, are you prepared to pay for it? Or are you going to say, I'm just not going to get those shots? And if your kid gets sick, it's passed along to all the other students that are in that school system. And so you've got to understand, what the hell's going on here with these people. And fortunately, my kids, of course, are all growing up. I have grandchildren in the school system. Now they're into second, third grade, so they're past these and they've already had their shots. But you need to pay attention to this because it can get scary as hell. It really can. Moving on. 11 New York City elected officials were arrested by ICE agents as the officials attempted to access a detention center in Lower Manhattan this past week. The officials, all Democrats, were attempting to inspect a 10th-story holding facility that was reported to have overcrowding and poor conditions. Since they were denied entry, the officials simply sat on the floor awaiting permission. And you can't blame them for what they're trying to do here. They just simply want to inspect the facility. And these ICE agents and all of their wonderful wisdom said, the hell with you. We'll just arrest you then. And again, officials should have the right to inspect a detention facility, especially if they're getting words that it is overcrowded and, not meeting conditions that should be there for people who are being detained. And for ICE just to simply push them around and arrest them to me, is disgusting. So, you can't blame these officials. They should be able to do what they want to do. Now, following up on this, FBI Director Kash Patel claimed this past Wednesday that he is barred by recent court orders from releasing thousands of documents connected to disgraced sex trafficker Jeffrey Epstein. I'm not going to break the law to satisfy your curiosity, Patel said during a second day of congressional oversight hearings after Republican Jamie Raskin challenged him on why he hasn't released more of the files. But Patel appears to be mischaracterizing those recent court orders, which came up during a hurried effort by the Trump administration to ask federal judges for permission to release grand jury material stemming from the case of Epstein and co-conspirator Maxwell. Judges considering the ask said it appeared to be an effort to confuse the public, noting that the materials consisted of only a few dozen pages of hearsay, much of which became public during court proceedings and were dwarfed by the FBI's massive trove of records. So, Kash Patel, through all the recent national events that we have been having here, has already proven that his inexperience in the position that he is in is coming back to haunt him. He releases way too much information. He voices, the FBI is going to be transparent, but he releases way too much information that a defendant and the defense can basically, come back and say, well, you said this, you said that, and then, a person can't get a fair trial. They got to move the venue of the trial, perhaps, because everybody's entitled to no matter what you think. Everybody in this country is supposed to be given a fair trial, okay, by a choice of their peers in a jury. And when you've got Patel to sit there releasing stuff left and right, well, it can come back to haunt you. So those are things that you've got to think about before you go shooting your mouth off. How much information do you want to give on what you're investigating? That's the question that you've got to ask yourself. So Kash Patel is under fire for that stuff that he's done. All right. Wednesday's quarter point cut is the first since December and lowers the Fed's short-term rate to about 4.1%, down from 4.13. What are we talking about? Finally, Trump got his way. The Feds lowered the interest rate. But the question is how long is it going to stay down? Now, the Fed's projected it will cut rates 2 more times before the end of the year. That's what they said. Now, the Fed has 2 goals when it sets the rate. 1, to manage prices for goods and services, and 2, to encourage full employment. This is known as the dual mandate. Now, typically, the Fed might increase the rate to try to bring down inflation and decrease it to encourage faster economic growth and more hiring. And the challenge now is the inflation is higher than the Fed's 2% target, but the job market is weak, and the Fed's it puts them kind of in a difficult position. So that's the trouble that we have here, is what is going to work and what's not going to work. And when you've got the job market right now not in a very good position, you can see why the Feds are in a very unique position of, saying we want to lower it more and we want to get people back to work. But, Trump's got this thing about, the interest rate should just come down whenever he says they should come down, as, my rich billionaires need more money to work with, so just lower the interest rates. That's not how our monetary system works, contrary to what he thinks. You just can't lower the interest rates at random whenever you think you need to lower them. And a lot of analysis goes in before you lower the interest rates. But, in this particular case, he finally caved in and said, okay, let's go ahead and lower it and see what happens. So it goes. The other thing I said, the big news this past week, of course, is Donald Trump's visit to England. Now, President Donald Trump used his Thursday's news conference with United Kingdom Prime Minister Keir Starmer to deliver a laundry list of long-debunked false claims about a variety of subjects, including inflation, immigration, tariffs, and the attack on the U.S. Capitol on January 6, 2021. Thousands of protesters also showed up, as you can see on this video that's running here. Here's a fact check of some of Trump's remarks at Chequers, which is the Prime Minister's country house. And please pay attention to this, because Trump, as you know, likes to rattle off a lot of things that he thinks his administration has done, is doing now, and will be doing in the future. And unfortunately, we do have his record where he says a lot of things and it's just simply not true. And I don't mean to be, a bad nanny here, but it does happen. And so let's go into it. Trump told his usual lie about the 2020 elections he lost, saying we won in 2020 big time, and he was defeated fair and square, as you know, by Joe Biden. Another thing that he likes to say is Trump falsely claimed that we've already solved inflation. We solved prices. This is vague than his frequent false claim that there is no inflation, but there's no basis even for the vaguer version. Inflation has been worsening since May after hitting a 4-year low in April. It was at 2.9% in August, up from 2.7% in July. One of the reasons, of course, the Fed's doing this interest rate lowering. And the August figure was the highest figure since it was at 3% in January. And, we have a lot of history here on inflation. Let's take gas prices. Trump always says gas is down. Well, here in Florida, gas a month ago was down to $2.89. Gas is back up to $3.15 to $3.20, depending on where you want to go. So why are gas prices going back up, folks? Now, Trump repeated his false claim that we inherited the worst inflation in the history of our country, adding we had inflation the likes of which we really have never seen. They say that they're 48 years, and I'll accept that, but I really don't. We've had the worst inflation in the history of our country. Even the peak year-over-year inflation under Biden, 9.19% in June 2022, was the highest in between 40 and 41 years, not 48 years, and certainly not in U.S. history. It was nowhere close to the all-time high record of 23.7% set in 1920. So again, Mr. Trump, where are you getting these figures? And inflation then plummeted to the 3% level he hit in Biden's last partial month in office. So, who pays tariffs? Trump, who habitually makes the false assertion that foreign countries pay the tariffs he has imposed on U.S. imports of those country products, said in his time. China is paying a very large tariff right now to the United States. It is U.S. importers, not China, who make the tariff payments to the United States government. And those importers often pass on some of those costs to consumers. This is what's contributing to inflation. All these tariffs are in place. Trump says he's getting billions and billions of dollars from those tariffs, and they're going to pass those costs on to you, the consumer. Just how much can, manufacturers absorb for their imports? And U.S. aid to Ukraine. Trump delivered a vaguer version of his oft-repeated claim that the United States has given $350 billion in wartime aid to Ukraine, this time saying the United States is into that war for $350 billion. He didn't define into that war, but if it was his usual assertion about U.S. aid, again, this is false. A German think tank that has closely tracked wartime aid to Ukraine says the United States allocation of about $135 billion to Ukraine, and he had committed about $5 billion more, through June at current exchange rates. The United States Government Inspector General overseeing the federal Ukraine response says that the United States had distributed about $94 billion for the response as of the end of June 2025. And had appropriated about $93 billion more, including money that was spent in the United States and in broader Europe rather than Ukraine itself. And migration under Biden. Speaking of migration to the United States under Biden, Trump complained that the number of people entering the country without being vetted, then said 25 million. In my opinion, that would be about 25 million. Even Trump's previous 21 million, he just pulls these figures, out of the air, was a wild exaggeration. Through December 2024, the last full month under the Biden administration, the federal government had recorded under $11 million migrations nationwide with encounters through migrants during that administration, including millions who were rapidly expelled from the country, even adding the so-called gotaways who evaded detection, estimated by the House Republicans as being roughly 2.2 million. So there's no way the total is even close to what Trump has said. Migration and prisons. Trump repeated the claim again that under Biden there were prisons from the Congo being released into the United States and prisons opened up to Venezuela and many other countries pouring into the United States. Trump has never provided corroboration for such his claims about foreign countries in general or the Democratic Republic of Congo, the neighboring Republic of Congo, or Venezuela in particular. Experts in all three countries said during the Biden administration that they had seen no basis for Trump's stories. The governments of both of the Congo countries told CNN the stories were false, and an expert on the global prison population told CNN she saw absolutely no evidence of any country emptying its prisons into somehow release prisoners into the United States. Pelosi and January 6th, Trump falsely claimed that he had proved right in his frequent claims that Democratic former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi rejected his offer of 10,000 National Guard troops in January 6, 2021, the day of the pro-Trump riot at the U.S. Capitol. Trump said they found out that Nancy Pelosi actually was offered the 10,000 soldiers and she turned them down. It's not clear who they are, but Trump's claim remains uncorroborated. And the House Speaker, who has no power over the District of Columbia's National Guard, that is under the control of the president himself, wouldn't have had the authority to reject the offer even if it had been presented to her, which she has steadfastly said it was never offered to her at all. The House January 6th committee, Trump vaguely repeated his false claim that the House Select Committee that investigated the attack on the Capitol found out many things that were very bad, so they deleted and destroyed all the information. They didn't. The committee preserved a large volume of documentary evidence with the National Archives in addition to releasing a lengthy public report, more than 100 interview transcripts, and various other written audiovisual materials. I could go on and on. I really could. But Trump, he likes to not talk about the things that are negative, and he likes to talk about the things that are positive. So as you can see, Trump likes to go on and on, and just say stuff that he can't find that things that are true to him. So, if it's negative, he's not going to talk about it. If it's positive in his favor, he's going to talk about it. And Trump's not alone. I'll be honest with you, all presidents do this. They will admit things that doesn't fit the narrative of what they're trying to talk about, and they will stretch the truth a little bit about things that are positive for them. So, Trump, however, is notorious for doing this more than other past presidents. He likes to, woe's me, everybody's picking on me, and this is how it should be, and I've got great things going on here, and so you just really need to understand that I'm the poor victim here. So it goes. All right, let's get into our top story. And my top story is I am going to talk about this deal with Jimmy Kimmel. And why am I going to talk about it is because I've had some experience as a broadcast journalist, and my time in doing the news for television stations that I have worked for, and also as an independent contractor providing video news stories for major networks. So I understand what's going on here with the deal with Jimmy Kimmel and the FCC. So let's start with the FCC. Now, on this past Wednesday, the FCC chairman said Kimmel appeared to be making an international effort to mislead the public that conservative activist Kirk's assassination was a right-wing Trump supporter. He called Kimmel's comments about Kirk's death truly sick and said his agency had a strong case for holding Kimmel, ABC, and Disney accountable for spreading misinformation. Now, this is Brandon Carr, the FCC chairman. Now, as you know, Kirk was a top conservative podcaster, and he was shot and killed last week at an appearance on a college campus in Utah. Kimmel made several remarks about the reaction to Kirk's death last week on Jimmy Kimmel Live, including that many of the MAGA land and were working very hard to capitalize on the murder of Charlie Kirk. And this is a very serious issue for Disney right now. So, first and foremost, you need to hear what Jimmy Kimmel actually said. So let's go ahead and roll that clip.
We had some new lows over the weekend with the MAGA gang desperately trying to characterize this kid who murdered Charlie Kirk as anything other than one of them and doing everything they can to score political points from it.
So now Brandon Carr, the FCC chairman, was on the Benny Johnson podcast, and he made the statement, we can do this the easy way or the hard way, and that's what scared ABC. These companies can find a way to take action on Kimmel, or there's going to be additional work for the FCC ahead. So that's what he said. Now, House Democrat leaders on Thursday called for Carr's resignation, accused him of bullying ABC into suspending Kimmel. In a joint statement, the leaders, including House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, said the move was part of a Trump and Republican efforts to wage a war on the First Amendment. And Trump himself said Jimmy Kimmel's not a talented person. He had a very bad ratings, and they should have fired him a long time ago. So, you can call that free speech or not. He was fired for lack of talent. It is true Jimmy Kimmel's ratings were not good, but neither is anything on late night with the networks these days because of the streaming, that's going on. Again, Trump made some very unusual remarks when he was allowing the press to interview him on Air Force One. Watch this clip.
Mr. President, are you going to ask Brendan Carr to weigh in on other late night hosts that you have said should be off the air?
Late night host is on network television. There is a licensing. I'll give you an example. I read someplace that the networks were 97% against me. I get 97% negative, and yet I won it easily. I won all 7 swing states, popular, I won everything. And if they're 97% against, they give me only bad publicity or press. I mean, they're getting a license. I would think maybe their license should be taken away. It will be up to Brendan Carr. I think Brendan Carr is outstanding. He's a patriot. He loves our country, and he's a tough guy. So we'll have to see.
Now, clearly, Nexstar is sucking up to Brandon Carr of the FCC. Next, as you're well aware of, ABC and has a lot of their stations are owned by two companies, and they're trying to merge, just like what happened with CBS. So these networks get scared. ABC had an emergency board meeting, and they really didn't want to fire Jimmy Kimmel, but they felt they had no choice because they got to allow these mergers to go through. So Trump uses the FCC to leverage things to get things his way and remove people who speak negatively of him. Again, we're turning more and more into state-controlled media here in the United States because Trump wants everybody in the media to talk favorably about him and not negative about him. He wants to remove the First Amendment right with media for free speech, and this is where we're going with the United States right now, and it's kind of sad. I have been involved in media for some 45 years, and journalism is supposed to be free speech and freedom of the press. Remember that. That's what we've been taught in colleges and universities is freedom of the press. That is going away faster than I can shake my head because Trump wants nobody to speak negatively about him. It should be all high praise and nothing else. So, again, Nexstar is sucking up to Carr. One telecom lawyer told the media Wednesday that just after the show's cancellations, Kimmel's comments are obnoxious, but not from a First Amendment standpoint. They have been protected in the past. Again, Kimmel is a comedian. Public figures are considerably, made fun of a lot. Celebrities and political figures. Comedians make fun of them. That's what they do. It's part of their First Amendment right, and it's also, again, freedom of the press. You can go to any nightclub, you're going to hear comedians typically make fun of public figures, and that includes the president. It has been done by past presidents. It's nothing different, whether it was Biden or Obama or any of these past presidents, including Trump. The comedians make fun of them. That's their job. So, what are you going to do? Either way, it doesn't matter that the FCC has to grant you a license when it can make a case, which is what Carr is doing. He's a puppet for Trump. In the past, the FCC has been an independent organization that does, monitor things, that stations are doing things in the public interest, and that licenses are being, issued in a respectful manner. That's what the Federal Communications Commission's job is. They're supposed to be an independent arm of the government, not a puppet for the government, and do the president's bidding. And this is what's going on. So, again, as Carr put it in a Wednesday interview with Fox News and Sean Hannity, running a narrow partisan circus, whatever the public interest means, it's not that. Nexstar is particularly vulnerable in Carr's public interest interpretation given its plans to expand. Now, this is where this is all coming to, folks. It is already one of the biggest owners of the ABC affiliate stations carrying Kimmel's show, controlling more than 30 stations around the country. The deal to buy Tegna, announced this past August, would extend the company's reach even more. Both companies combined would cover 80% of the households operating 265 stations in 44 states. In some markets, the new company will control 3 or 4 stations. Now, Trump, when he was on Air Force One, as you just saw in that clip, maybe trying to change media in the United States for state-controlled media. And you saw that clip. So, this is where we're going with this. Now, you saw what happened when CBS and Paramount bought Skydance. Again, you've got here these stations trying to merge together that are all ABC stations, and they need FCC approval to do that. So what are they going to do? They're going, oh, okay, no, okay, we'll get rid of Kimmel. It's okay. Just like CBS, got rid of their late night talk show host. And these stations are all scared to death that, in this day and age where everybody's trying to buy up everybody else, they need government approval. They will do whatever they got to do to make sure the deals go through. In other words, money talks, BS walks. That's what we're coming to. Money talks, BS walks. And if it's at the cost of, entertainment, so be it. And It's just a nature game in business. The First Amendment creates very, very strong protections from punishment for speech. That's what is offensive or for speech which people disagree with. Trump, started supporting free speech, as did Vance and Bondi at one time. Watch this clip.
I will also sign an executive order to immediately stop all government censorship and bring back free speech to America. Never again will the immense power of the state be weaponized to persecute political opponents. Jimmy Kimmel was fired because he had bad ratings more than anything else, and he said a horrible thing about a great gentleman known as Charlie Kirk. And Jimmy Kimmel is not a talented person. He had very bad ratings, and they should have fired him a long time ago. So, you can call that free speech or not. He was fired for lack of talent.
We have to ask ourselves the questions as leaders. Are we willing to defend people even if we disagree with what they say? If you're not willing to do that, I don't think you're fit to lead Europe or the United States.
There is a new sheriff in town, and under Donald Trump's leadership, we may disagree with your views, but we will fight to defend your right to offer it in the public square, agree or disagree.
So when you see someone celebrating Charlie's murder, call them out. And hell, call their employer.
I want you to think for a minute about the decades of abuse that has been heaped upon the good people of this nation. A political system that punishes hardworking citizens, oppresses them at every turn, takes away their right to free speech, the right to political expression, the right to fundamental safety in their own country.
To all of the domestic terrorists in this country spreading this evil hate, the power of law enforcement under President Trump's leadership will be used to find you, will be used to take away your money, take away your power, and if you've broken the law, to take away your freedom.
Under what circumstances will you prosecute journalists for what they write?
I believe in the freedom of speech. Only if anyone commits a crime. We will absolutely target you, go after you, if you are targeting anyone with hate speech, anything. And that's across the aisle. It's not free speech. When you come out and you say it's okay what happened to Charlie, we're firing people. We're seeing people online who are posting hate speech. They should be shut down.
Now, the bar for punishing speech based on content and especially based on viewpoint is extremely high. Now, following the backlash with Bondi, who backpedaled on her recent comments that she had, where, she was saying that everybody's going to have to be, free speech is not important, and I don't care if you have free speech or not. When Charlie Kirk first got assassinated, well, she backpedaled a little bit on that comment. And she already has been faced calls to resign and for how she handled the related files with the sex trafficker Jeffrey Epstein. And she did, appeared to backtrack her comments a little bit about freedom of speech. And she did say it's sacred in our country, and while we'll never impede upon that right, Bondi said in a statement, my intention was to speak about the threats of violence to individuals that incite against others. However, she did say, I am very still concerned about how broadly they are going to define what is an illegal threat and what is other loopholes that may carve out existing free speech cases. She added, I think that we all need to remain very vigilant. So, my final comment about all this on free speech is, as you saw in that clip, the Republicans have their version of what is free speech and what they have the right to say. But if anybody else, independents, Democrats, whoever, say something and they're exercising their free speech rights, now I'm not talking about hate speech here, folks. I'm talking about civil commentary, an opinion without any threat or to it, just civil. You and I having a conversation here, the Republicans still don't like it. So they say, that's wrong, unless you're talking positive, uplifting things about the Republican Party and the White House, that's all good. You can do that. But please, if you're going to start saying negative things about that, you no longer have free speech. You got to stop doing that. It's my way or the highway. And that's where we're crossing the fine line, I'm not talking about hate speech. That's wrong. I'm not talking about violence. That is also wrong. But we do have the right, at least so far, here in the United States, to have a difference of opinion about what you may say or about what I may say. You can disagree with what I may say. That's great. That's your constitutional, God-given right to disagree with me, as I have the right civilly, peacefully, and respectfully to disagree with what you may say. There's nothing wrong with that. That's where we should be. But even on that level, that is slowly being stripped away from us, to even peacefully or respectfully to disagree with somebody. That's being taken away from us. And our press and our media is the platform that we have the place to do that. And you can't take that away from us, in the media. And I'm going to be talking about TikTok here in a little bit too. You're going to see what's going on with that. But, for good grief, let's have the right to be able to do that. All right, that's my top story. Let's move on to some other news. The Senate has confirmed 48 of President Donald Trump's nominees all at once, voting for the first time under new rules to begin clearing a backlog of executive branch positions that has been delayed by Democrats. Frustrated by the stalling tactics, Senate Republicans moved last week to make it easier to confirm large groups of lower-level non-judicial nominations. Democrats had forced multiple votes on almost every one of Trump's picks, which upset him. And so they came up with this new rule, and now mass nominations for the president can now all be put into one vote. So, there you go. You want to get it done, ladies and gentlemen? Let's just go ahead and slap it all on one vote, and let's get it done and over with. Also, President Donald Trump says he's filing a lawsuit against the New York Times alleging defamation and accusing the outlet of being a virtual mouthpiece for the Democratic Party. The president is demanding $15 billion in damages, which exceeds the entire market cap of the New York Times company. The lawsuit is the latest example of what the First Amendment experts have described as presidential strategy to silence critical news coverage. Here we go again, and curb free speech by filing legally dubious lawsuits. Trump claims it's an effort to restore integrity to journalism. What's integrity to journalism? What he wants integrity in journalism to be. That's what it is. The defamation suit against the Times also names book publisher Penguin Random House and 4 Times reporters, 2 of whom wrote a book for Penguin titled Lucky Loser, How Donald Trump Squandered His Father's Fortune and Created the Illusion of Success. The 85-page lawsuit reads with Times like a pro-Trump op-ed with page after page of gushing praise for the president and repeated references to other lawsuits he has filed against other media outlets. And Kash Patel, he's back in the news. Trump's FBI director is also in hot water, as I just mentioned. Patel has been criticized for his handling of the Kirk investigation, sharing on social media at one point a suspect was in custody when he wasn't, but having to backtrack on an hour and a half later. But Patel has stood by his performance. Now, I talked about this earlier, how Kirk, that situation, and how, Patel was putting out a lot of information because he said he wants the FBI to be transparent. But sometimes you got to hold back things if you want to get a good, solid case. And if you're not careful, you're going to wind up in trouble. And this is where you're walking the fine line. Patel sometimes needs to shut up and withhold certain things that he's collecting so they can build a case. Otherwise, it can blow up in your face, and a good defense attorney can win their case because of, mistakes that Kash Patel has made. All right. Moving on to other news. Trump recently criticized Governor Kathy Hochul's move to endorse New York City's mayoral candidate, Zohran Mamdani. That guy that he likes to say is a communist. Remember that guy? Yeah. So that's what's going on there. He said in a post on Truth Social that it was a rather shocking development and a very bad one for New York City. due to the fact is that this mayoral candidate, how could such a thing happen? Washington will be watching this situation very closely. No reason to be sending good money after bad. Trump has also threatened in June to pull the federal funding from the city, saying that Madami would have to do the right thing or they're not going to get any money. So, Trump doesn't like this guy because of his last name, and he thinks he's a communist, and, all Democrats are communists in his viewpoint. And, it took a while for Kathy to endorse this guy. There's still some things that, they got to iron out, but they've had some good talks. And so now they're fine. This guy is already so far ahead in the polls that he's probably going to be a shoo-in to win the mayorship in New York City. And, but, Kathy did emphasize that she needed to know the next mayor will not be someone who would surrender 1 inch to President Trump. So, there you go. Another thing that's going on that I need to talk about. This just blows me away. President Trump has set the Beltway buzzing again this past week after draping the Department of Labor building in a monumental banner promoting himself. And Trump's scowling vision of now hangs 3-stories tall above a caption touting American workers first. Now, as you can see from these images, the banner joins a similar one at the United States Department of Agriculture and his recent takeovers of cultural institutions like the Kennedy Center and the Smithsonian Institution as the most visible efforts yet to make Trump's name and image indistinguishable from the idea of the U.S. government itself. For millions of MAGA voters, Trump has become the physical embodiment of American renewal. And that's, and what's wrong with a little hero worship after all? Trump's allies have argue that the cultural backlash to rebranding Washington in his image is nothing more than leftist Trump derangement syndrome. Experts on authoritarianism compare it to visual propaganda of strongmen like Iraq's Saddam Hussein and North Korea's defied leader Kim Jong-un. What you will see in Trump's cultural test is a lot of what kind of country you think America should become. Now, as you can see from these images, ladies and gentlemen, it's Trump basically saying, Kim does this in North Korea, and they do it in Russia with Putin. Why can't I do it? So he started to do it. And as you can see from the invoices here, they have spent thousands of dollars of your taxpayer dollars to do this. We all know who our president is. You don't need to have these huge, ungodly banners hanging, saying, I am your president. Look at me. We know who our president is. If we don't know him by now, you must have been in a cave. But this kind of stuff, folks, and this is my opinion, my commentary, is a waste of taxpayers' dollars. You don't need this crap. You don't. And there's so much more that you could do with over $16,000 than hang these stupid, ridiculous banners. They make absolutely no sense whatsoever. And I don't understand this at all. Why you would spend this kind of money on this kind of stuff. All right, in other news, and I talked about this earlier in my podcast about TikTok. There's a deal. There is a deal to sell TikTok to the United States. And Secretary of Treasury Scott Bessent said on Monday that Washington and Beijing had struck a framework for this deal. And this is what's going to happen. It would create a U.S.-only app, which is going to be run by Oracle, Silver Lake, and venture capital firm Andreessen Horowitz, with an 80% ownership by them, the U.S. investors, and 20% by ByteDance of China. Now, he offers very little details about the agreement, but I just, through the research that I've done, pretty much told you what's going to happen here. Now, one key sticking point was about who was going to control TikTok's algorithm, which dictates which users see on the app. He said, we're not going to talk about the commercial teams of the deal. He said it's between two private parties, but the commercial terms have been agreed upon, and he did not indicate which parties he was referring to, but, we already know what it is. And so what's going to happen here, though, which you all you TikTokers out there. It's going to be under U.S. control. And these companies are in bed with Donald Trump. So, for all of you out there on TikToks, including myself, who love to do political commentary and maybe speak things that are not in favor of the president, you're going to get banned, and also you're going to have to download a new app. The present TikTok app that you now have is, of course, the TikTok of China. You're going to need a new app for the U.S. because once this deal's done, you're not going to be able to access TikTok in its present form. You're going to have to download the new clone version that is for United States residents only. Now, I'm not saying whether a VPN will help you stay on there or not. If you have a VPN, it might or might not. I don't know. But and when you download the new United States TikTok app, you're going to be under the guidelines and rules and regulations of that U.S. app. So just telling you, you need to pay attention. And I'm going to wrap up my podcast with this comment. And it's interesting. When they created the Charlie Kirk Celebration Day, and again, I understand that, but there was a comment on the Senate version from our own Florida senator that he introduced this comment. And in his comment, he talked a lot about free speech and, how Charlie Kirk was assassinated for exercising his right of free speech. And he has a point. He probably was. And it's sad. Again, it's so damn sad about how we have violence in the United States. But AOC, she, if you haven't seen it on the web, she did not support the resolution. And she made some wonderful comments about what about free speech for others, like what's happening with Jimmy Kimmel. And some of you may interpret that was hate speech. That's your right. Again, comedians sometimes say very outrageous things. That's their job. That's how they push buttons. That's how they get their laughs. Whether you think it's right or wrong, that's all comedians make fun of public figures, including, our president and everybody else. And it's just not Trump. It's gone on from the 1920s, no matter who's in office. Comedians make fun of the president and national events. And they do it under the auspices of free speech. And we got to be very careful where we're going with this, because when the Constitution was written, one of the things that was given to us is freedom of the press and media and free speech. And when people start controlling how you say, what you say, how you think, when you're going to do it, when you're not going to do it, you see where our country is heading. And that is a dangerous, slippery slope to be going down. And that's my comment. This is Roy Garden with The Right Has Left. I hope you enjoyed this podcast. I look forward to your comments. Until next time, you try to have a good week. Take care.